thank you so much, Stephanie, and to the artists and everyone in the audience, and to Art Basel for convening us here for this, I think, very interesting conversation. So this idea of living tradition is something that has been very close to me since I was a kid, because my mother is indigenous Chamorro from Guam, and I would ask her why we don't have Pacific Islander objects lying all over the house. And she would say that because of typhoons and other environmental reasons, that objects come and go, but it's the ability to know how to make them that is the real value. And I think, I was very inspired. It's actually nice to see Uli Sig in the audience, because I was reading his interview with Shao Fan this morning, and maybe I'm going to quote Shao Fan back to Shao Fan. But it was this beautiful quote where he was talking about art is a remedy that can compensate for this boundless powerlessness we face being in the world. I liken art to pearls or agar incense wood. Both are in essence reactions of an organism to injury. And I think when you think about tradition, in a way, it's how are we taking what we inherit and bringing it into our times and responding to our times, and being alive is a lot about injury and healing from injury. So maybe since I started with Shao Fan's quote, Shao Fan, how do you see your relationship in time today to tradition, also, in life and in your work?
Thank
you, Diana. Thank you, Citra. I'm very happy to be here and discuss Citra and Diana. I think, and the past, the relation between the past and the present and the future. I've all along thought that future seems to have very little to do with us. That's my personal feeling. I think our past, for me, cannot be extricated from the present. So at present, it is probably the thinnest layer. So I have always had this perception about time. Therefore, when I was young, when I got into touch with traditional Chinese art, such as my own parents, the art education they received were predominantly Western, so I received both educational sources. So when I was young, my understanding of traditional Chinese art was not very profound. And many things, when I cast my eye on them, I did not really respond viscerally to them. For example, some very ancient artworks. But as I grew older, as I hit 40 years old, and I started to develop a renewed interest in traditional Chinese art and culture, and I started to became interested. So I discovered that perhaps traditional Chinese art and aesthetic were more suitable for people who were a little bit more aged. It is very hard for young people to understand. It is a culture for the aged, for the old. So after I turned 40, I started to adopt traditional elements to feed into my art, to the ground layer of my work. So I sort of excavated what I learned when I was in oil painting and all the other Western techniques I learned when I was a young person, and tried to connect them to that layer, the ground layer.
Very beautiful. So Citra, also, I think maybe to go back to the Shao Fan metaphor of, art as, an organism responding to injury. Like, also when you inherit tradition, sometimes there's some violence or injury within that, such as patriarchy. And I think that's something very interesting in your work, how you're looking at tradition, but trying to dismantle some structures that might be injurious within them. Can you tell us a bit about that process?
Okay, thank you, Diana. It's really great honor to be with Master Shao Fan in the same panel. I mean, really great spirit for me. Recently, I feel awakening when see Afandi painting in Hawaii in East West Center. East West Center is a mural with the big mural with the God figure with the hand, the God hand as wide as Pacific Ocean, and there is three important figure inside the hand, which is Semar. It is mythological god in Indonesia, reflecting how human connecting to the God in spirituality. And then there is Mahatma Gandhi talk about how human have relation with another human, like humanity, and about peace. And the third one is Lao Tzu, one of the Chinese philosophers, talk about how nature, we cannot interrupt nature. We are under the law of the nature. I think this kind of Eastern philosophy is really relevant until today when we talk about the tradition, what we inherited, the knowledge I inherited as rooted Balinese person. And I feel like there's another aspect before we understand about the substance. The substance means like the history and then the product of art, such as the performance, painting, ritual, etc. It pulled me back to the essence about being resistance, being resilience, and also persistence with the concept of the traditional life. And it make me can navigate my art, accessing the old knowledge that taken for granted, because the relation with the knowledge is really amazing, and like receiving this kind of knowledge also means you accepting the concept of time that is not linear. All this time we try to read about the, let's say, the trajectory of the art history in linear way. But for us, it's like a cycle. It can go through the past, it can go to the present, it also can be a prophecy or the prediction of the future. And for us, it's nothing new under the sun. We just make the new context, renew and renew, because we believe the concept of a reincarnation. So the body can change, but the spirit still remain. That's I feel like awakening by making this kind of, using this spirit in making art. And then, I start to, let's say, rereading the ancient history of Bali, how to know about, let's say, the woman in ancient painting in Bali, for example. And I feel like how to resonate in this new, let's say, the recent problem that we're facing today in terms of humanity, for example, or in nature. We're facing a lot of problem of nature, exploitation, etc. I feel like the traditional way of life is somehow controlling the aggressivity of the, the development of the building, for example, that destroy nature. I think as traditional people, for me, it's really important to keep the spirit and reflecting into my artwork. Yes.
It's very beautiful. I think it's, in my mother's side of the family, the culture is similar. Like your ancestors are both behind you and ahead of you because they came before you, but you'll join them in the future. So it's this kind of beautiful circle. And I think it's beautiful that you bring up spirituality in the process of making as being part of that, which I also see very much in your work, Shao Fan, as well. Can you talk a bit about that spiritual element of your work? Because I know you're drawing on a lot of these references when making contemporary art as well.
Yes, traditional things in traditional Chinese art, there are so many elements that that kind of crystallize in my memory and influence me. But of course, a lot of contemporary elements are also, for me, they are also very rich resources in their own rights. So for me, perhaps most recently, what strikes me most it was when I was in Beijing during the Corona crisis. Perhaps during 2020 and 2021, when I was in my studio. I was basically locked inside for a very long period of time, and I was not aware when this lockdown would be lifted. So it was also giving me an opportunity. When I was composing a painting, for example, I had limitless time that was available to me for this painting. So I would spend 15 hours to 16 hours at work. And I thought the concept of time, or it was at a standstill, or perhaps it was limitless, was infinite. So when I was working on that painting, and suddenly, all of a sudden, I felt perhaps a sort of a traversal, teleported back into the Liangzhu period 6,000 years ago. 5,000 to 6,000 years ago, in southern China near the Yangtze River Delta, and I was a craftsman, and I was in that mode of existence, and I suddenly felt that I was a craftsman. But of course, the jade works of Liangzhu period, it was probably the earliest artworks made with jade. So that particular period, you saw these wonderful, exquisite works of jade. And then we probably say that was, you can say they're artists, they were craftsmen. So when they were working on those works, what kind of state of mind did they have? When they were creating, it was perhaps sort of different from what the artists of contemporary times. Perhaps there's also commonalities, but that particular moment, I suddenly felt that the craftsmanship, the years they spent working on a piece of work, and then we also discussed that it is a ritualistic, a spiritual, religious mode of thought. So. And then I felt deeply, because jade for me was one of my favorite traditional Chinese art material, because for me, in China, there were a lot of things that were known in the world. For example, the porcelain, silk, and all kinds of architectural styles and furniture. But for me, the concept of jade is important to Chinese culture. They appeared very early, and it also has a special cultural connotation in traditional Chinese culture. When you discuss the quality of a man, a character of a man, you say he is a gentleman, and his character is like that of jade. And we are trying to say that his character is elevated, exalted, like jade. So porcelain is like has a tactile touch of the jade. And furniture, when you say the furniture is made like and then bronze is also given a quality of jade. So jade is a sort of a golden standard of aesthetic elevation. It is also a primordial source material. So this, for me, has impacted me very deeply. Thank you.
Beautiful. I remember I had an experience where I was working on I think it was the 2011 Shanghai Biennial, and they had city pavilions. So I was working on the Mumbai City Pavilion, and when the doors opened, people came in and they immediately started touching an Indian artist named Neha Choksi's sculpture. Everyone was touching it, and she was kind of freaking out until someone told them that actually with jade, or that there was like the patina of time, right? The more people that touch the jade, and the more you see that, the more valuable it is. And suddenly it changed her attitude to that interaction. And I think that's also beautiful when you think of living traditions, like that touch of people over time, giving that sense of value. And maybe, I think another thing that both of you try to do in your work is kind of, dismantle traditions and rebuild them in a different way. And also that's a form of learning. When you're a kid, how do you take something apart? How do you rebuild it? And that's kind of how you learn. It's another way of learning beyond books. So maybe, sorry to go back to you, but I know that, part of your process was also dismantling furniture or dismantling, these kind of traditional structures. Can you maybe tell us a little bit about that material relationship with tradition and with touch and with taking things apart and putting them back together?
I can do that. For Chinese traditional furniture from the Ming Dynasty, Chinese furniture, I would say, had been the most classic, and it was at its peak. And when I was small in my home, we collected some Ming Dynasty furniture. So from young, I had been very familiar with Chinese traditional furniture. And then I had painted some paintings which are related to traditional Chinese furniture. But it was not enough for me. It was insufficient. And then I bought and purchased some pieces, some old traditional Chinese furniture pieces. And I used these pieces to make creation. So it was beyond painting. And through this kind of dismantling and reconstructing, through this process, I find that I was really interested in design. I was not in design before. And so I would say it is my teacher. Ming Dynasty furniture is my teacher. So in producing this woodwork, furniture, there was design element in it. Because furniture, I would say, is a small architecture. And architecture is an enlarged piece of furniture, and they follow the same logic. So at the time, I use these pieces of broken pieces of Chinese furniture to do design, and I used it as a symbol as well in my artwork. And then after that, within the furniture, I used its aesthetics and also its logic of structure. I extracted those, and I used furniture methods to create objects which are not really furniture. For example, a piece of eyelash. This eyelash, structurally, is from the Ming Dynasty design. And then there are a few joints which you can basically take open, and you can open them, dismantle them endlessly. And they can be dismantled into a few separate pieces, and you can enjoy these pieces separately. So This is a methodology for the objects. Apart from visual enjoyment, in Chinese tradition, there is another way of enjoyment, which is touching it, touching the object. It's called ba wan in Chinese. And jade, exactly, is an object for ba wan, for touching enjoyment. And jade has a relationship with human. The human being can change the jade, and the jade can change the human. So in this ba wan, in this touching enjoyment, I also build this into the furniture, into my objects.
So I think, you and I, we had a really beautiful discussion once in Brussels about, how you were kind of dismantling traditional Balinese painting, both from like who was mixing the pigments, who got to make the images, who was depicted and how they were depicted. And I think it would be great if you could share a little bit about that process, because it's so more than what you see in the paintings. It's really about how they were made, who was making them. I'd love to hear, bring everyone else into those insights.
Okay, thank you. I think the same method with Master Shao Fan about reconnecting with the old material that I can find from the antique shop. Like I use old pillar, for example, for my artwork in Ria Biennial. I found the pillars from around maybe like 70 years old or maybe like 100 years old, and how I try to channeling myself to the materiality and get a sense of semiotic rather than the symbolic. Means like semiotic means the language can perform that even we didn't, let's say, find a language like to sense, to feel. Because I feel like the material store the memory of the past, something like that. And before we making art is for devotion. I mean, it's part of the ritual, it's part of the ceremony, and we making art until it reach the peak of the moment you feel sublime. Art can beyond of seeing, but to sense emotion, to touch people, something like that. And then after the influence of colonial around 1920, we, like after Bali defeated by Dutch, and then we changed the mindset of seeing art as devotion, become art as commodity. And to please the tourists, for example, until today, Bali is stigmatized, making traditional art, etc., just part of the souvenir. That's why I feel like I want to challenge this kind of mindset that we inherit until my generation, because my generation quite suffer to get recognized in Bali because this kind of stigma. That's why I kind of go to basic, learn from the traditional artists in Kamasan village. This Kamasan painting actually developed in Bali from 15th century, and it's like illustrate a lot of very important manuscript in Indonesia, and it become like base of our, let's say, political situation, like not only the religious, this manuscript about, but something else. And when I learned from my teacher, she is priestess, I get another value of seeing the artwork is just not only, like to please the eye, for example. But for me, it's how to dig deeply my subconsciousness of my childhood memory, birth, and grow up with this kind of ritual. And somehow we live in this contemporary era. I mean, every artist, either they do the traditional technique or modern everything. We just live in this kind of contemporary spirit. That's why I just like to navigate my childhood memory of making ritual into the installation I made in my artwork. Like just play with the stage, because I feel like our ritual is like a theater. There's a dramaturgy, there's a priest as a leader of the ritual, the people follow the instruction of the priest, there's music. dance, etc. And this create a new cosmology of the art. And this kind of possibility is not only resonate to the people, but also resonate to the circumstances, the nature, because we believe art can heal. Art can, heal the nature, heal the people. So when I learned from my elder, like the Kamasan community, we do the art collectively, not based on individually. That kind of the sense of collectiveness, it start to fade away in this kind of modern living. That I'm very, I think this is my mission to bring back to community. That's why I really love to collaborate now with the traditional community of women. With the Kamasan painter, and another work of mine is embroidery work I do with the community in West Bali. And somehow I feel like my art journey is connecting me to new people that I can collaborate with. I mean, I'm really, grateful for that. Yes.
And I think you and I think very similarly on that. And yesterday I had this profound moment at M Plus with Iko from the Architecture and Design Department, and she was showing me the first Walkman, which was from 1979. And she was positing that this was the beginning of an architecture for loneliness. And that actually the first Walkman had 2 holes for headphones, because that idea of listening alone was so radical that they couldn't imagine, people walking around on their phones alone listening to things. And I think that is really interesting. Also in both of your practices, or when you were talking about that Baomian, about how people over time come into the work changes people, people change the work. I think also something that I think about in my curatorial practice is this Western idea of maintenance. So so in Bali, for example, or I'm sure in many cultures, there's this idea that you make something, it gets destroyed, and you make it again. It's almost like this ritualization. But the same thing could happen with maintenance, right? If you turn maintenance into a ritual, it's like a birthday party for the object. It kind of stays alive. So I guess, also on that topic of living traditions, when you talk about these communities that you work with, right, they're carrying those traditions in a way, and you're coming with something new. I think it would be great, maybe, because we just spoke, Shao Fan, if you could come into this, how do you work with traditional artisans? How does that, because I know you've worked with artisans from the past that might not be around anymore in the furniture, that you might, you see their work, but do you also collaborate with living artisans?
So my interaction with contemporary artists and craftsmen, right? Yes. I have an assistant, and he or she is in traditional Chinese furniture, and I work with my assistant. And in the beginning, we were very young. We were both very young. Traditional furniture, to us, was something that we wanted to learn about. So we were growing together. In China, perhaps you would know that when it came to the early 1980s, this tradition, Chinese tradition, were introduced into our lives. There were a few decades during which it was truncated, obliterated. And then from then on, starting from the early 1980s, we started to be interested again in our traditions, in our traditional craftsmanship, for example. So we went to the south, for example, to look at bamboos and the structures made from bamboo sticks or young bamboo sticks. And that was very special. It was a type of craftsmanship, very special. There are a lot of bamboos in China, and there are a lot of Chinese art or objects made of bamboo. but not in the north of China. There are not a lot of bamboo in northern China. So we went to the south to look at this craftsmanship related to bamboos, and there was a recovery of this kind of craftsmanship. For a few decades, it was lost. And so we went to the south to look at ceramics and china production and craftsmanship. And we discovered that a lot of these factories for china and ceramics, these craftsmen, when they were painting on the china, the way they painted, the first time when I saw it, I was shocked because it was so very different from what we were learning in the art academies. So very different. When I first saw their produced work, and I saw their hand, the right hand, holding the brush, the paintbrush, it was strong, but at the same time it's so swift, and just with a stroke of the brush there was this line made, and this line is not exact, but at the same time it was so sharp, so exact. So it was through many times of replication and through polishing of the skill that it was possible, only through this. So today in our modern day painting, there is a lot of this. And I would say, especially for us painters, every day we're painting, and all of a sudden when we see this feeling of the hand holding the brush, I was at the time totally taken aback. So today, a lot of our modern artists, we forget about craftsmanship. But actually, in a lot of the traditional arts and craft, it's been preserved, and it is giving us a kind of guidance. Just as mentioned, in Chinese Taoism, or in Zhuangzi, philosopher, the masters, the great craftsmen, for example, how to dismantle a bovine, a cow, for example, or even in producing objects of art. It is always through endless replications producing memory and producing skill. And the skill, when it comes to a certain high level, art is pushed to another higher level.
Something I'm working on a project in Bukhara, Uzbekistan right now, which is a seat of a certain form of Sufism called Naqshbandi, which also means to engrave on the heart. And it's this idea that you put your hands to your work and there you find the divine. And you find that through craft, which is really beautiful. You don't know what will come the next moment, but if you put your hands to that gift that you have, which could be craft, which could be art, you can reach a different place. And it's very profound, or at least also for me, when I see these, kind of mind-blowing techniques which travel over time. Have you had a similar experience with the communities that you work with? And I know that you keep finding new communities to work with in Indonesia, Citra?
Yes, I agree with Master Shao Fan about the power of the lines, because we do the same too in Bali. Like for the traditional painting, making the lines very long experience. I mean, until for whole lifetime, they just finishing the technique with the lines, with the very thin line from the brush, means you injecting the soul inside the painting. And it's very beautiful because I feel there's no dichotomy, there's no difference between craft and artists in Bali, because we are working together. Everyone is established of their own ability to create, to share the knowledge, etc. And I really like the sense of idea become holistic, that everyone can master everything, because I'm not born from the art institution, so I kind of rebel about the idea of mastering one skill something. So I learned everything. I have so many language to express my idea, and then in any form of aesthetic like installation, painting, video, etc. As long as I can transfer and deliver the essence of my painting and the message that also I carry from the community I work with, that is the important ones. And for me, because they're senior, they're saltier than the ocean. I learn a lot from them, and the philosophy they receiving by doing the something considered inherited technique is really enriching me as the young artist. I think we need more that kind of relation happening. Let's say, as a people who study art, for example, you can just go studio visit and meet the senior artists and learn from them about what is their experience, what is their philosophy and ideology in making art. I mean, it's really enriching as a community, because our art in Bali also not, it's all integrated in every aspect of life, not only presenting in white cube, for example. We enjoy art in every place, in the temple, in the house, in the architecture. And architecture also reflecting, let's say, the philosophy, for example, like the mandala, because in Bali we inherit like a syncretism between Hindu and Buddhism. So all the knowledge is on the seeing. Like I'm really, as an artist, I feel like it's a great ability to have that super sensitivity to see everything is art, like, yeah. And the relation with the craftsmen, maybe they didn't have our, let's say, the method of thinking as an artist, but both of us work can navigate together what is the mission and vision in making art. Like, art should be have vision and mission for something that still mystery. I don't know, that's the beautiful things.
Beautiful. So what do you think about this, hierarchy we find between fine arts and applied arts?
Yes, indeed. We discussed this in between the artist communities, because in China, I feel in the past there was no such concept as art, or the whole idea of art is quite different from what we call art today. Today we consider art and crafts. There is some sort of a distinction, but I think in ancient times there was no such distinction. In China, especially, the most crucial thing is the taste it conveys to its audience, and that's probably what matters most. And also in China, the visual art and visual art resources are tremendous. A body of things, not just painting or sculpture could cover. It also touches upon many things, from architecture to landscaping, gardens, to ceramics, porcelain, and wooden, and also textile and silk, for example. I think it's a very, very wide artistic ecosystem. It has formed a gigantic system. And for me, many items, many elements are are basically a synthesis. For example, in the Chinese past, everything was organically blending into each other. All these genres were closely, intrinsically connected to each other. For example, the painting and calligraphy, for example, the relationship between those two genres, and furniture and architecture, their intrinsic relationship, and painting and gardens, there have always been closely linked together in terms of aesthetics, in terms of philosophical underpinnings. They were all closely related. And when we Chinese always say that the ancients, they should be good at the chin zither, chess, and also calligraphy and painting, that they should have cultivate broad interest. Calligraphy and zither playing and painting, as well as prosody and composition of articles. For today, I feel there's more division of labor. What is your industry? What is your field? It's not like in the ancients. They were what we call intellectual today. Back in the days, it was a much broader concept, or let's say collection of hobbies, and painting was probably one of the many hobbies or specialties. And the people of those days, the creative people of those days, it's like a gigantic pot of water, and you just shake it a little bit, and then the spilled bits of water was probably his painting, or his creativity was very accidental like that.
Clearly, you have a talent for words in addition to painting and sculpture. Citra, what do you think about this? These divisions between fine arts and applied arts.
So actually, I didn't see that kind of thing. Like, I see the whole things, the whole presentation, what is the purpose of making art. Either it's applied or not, either it's art for art's sake, either it's art for devotion, art for, telling about some spirit or ideology. For me, is need to be read in the whole things, like in the whole complete things. And then, I feel, I also feel like, when the crafter make embroidery and they apply the cloth on the tree, it's very beautiful aesthetic of how we protect the tree too. Like, we protect the tree from the destruction, for example, because we believe it's like the body, there's a spirit inside it, and it's work. Like, art guide you in certain function, in the certain message, so you have that kind of control of yourself as human. Like, all this time, we believe like human thinking, cogito ergo sum, for example, we exist because we thinking. But for the traditional mindset, Eastern philosophy, it's not about human mind, human logic. It's about the knowledge that we receive taken for granted from the sky or from the earth. And, like something that inspire artists to make art in this kind of cosmology also very, like the function is also like to protect the nature, to protect the humanity. I think I like this big idea to be applied in this.
这个也可以放在现在的艺术创作当中去理解。非常有意思。我们刚才都谈到一种精神的状态，在我们做艺术的时候，在我们刚才谈到的应用艺术跟那个就是艺术，就是比较精细的艺术方面，大家可能看过就是其中一些就是 Paul Pfeiffer 的那个雕塑，这是 William Lyle 是做那个工作的，就是为什么 Paul 他的名字放在这些雕塑上面，但是这个实在这个工匠的名字没放在上面呢？其实这个是有关力量有关的。但是我们的世界不可能在很短的时间去改变。但是我在乌兹别克斯坦有一个Bukhara 这个双年展，我被邀请去做那个策展，当中呢也有非常丰富的那个传统的工艺，当中呢也包括就是工匠的一些雕塑，在当中呢，我希望可以改变刚才讲到这个力量的不对等，我是不是也可以把工匠的名字也放在这个雕塑这个作品方面？两位。我们刚才听到大师的分享下来呢，我们也将会让大家提一些问题。现在大家都明白了你们的一些宗旨大师是不是可以谈一下这个屏幕上面看到你们的作品呢Shao Fan的作品在屏幕上面出现的时候，是不是可以做一些介绍呢？让我们的观众可以有更多的理解，这样好吗
Do you want to start to talk a bit to these images that we're showing?
So I like to work with big scroll painting because my childhood memory actually seeing scroll painting hanging around the Balinese architecture that until maybe like 100 meters, like it's challenged me like if the ancestor or the senior artist could make it, why I cannot make it as part of how I devote to the narrative, to the history I inherited, for example. So I like to work with the idea to bring the authentic materiality into the presence. That's why I work with the crafter who work with the Kamasan canvas, for example, that's still made traditionally. They wash the cloth on the river and glue with the rice flour and smooth it with the sisal as the part of the process. It's very technical, but somehow I feel like the crafter also injecting the memory of the space, the memory of the river, how it dry in the sunlight, that somehow it's really inspire me to make story about nature there, something that we will be missed a lot because the rapid development, like it's somehow it feels nostalgic. But it's also, like I believe it will be motivate my generation or maybe younger generation to do something to protect it. So this is what I only hope making work. It's like it's like a possession. If you make this big, you want it bigger and bigger. Because somehow the way we look at art, like I hang it on the ceiling, for example, it's how we look about the revelation, the spirituality, the knowledge that even not written in the book. And somehow it surprised me why I make this iconography that I don't understand. But like, seems very primordial, seems very ancient, but I asked like my teacher, she is priestess, and she is so familiar with iconography from certain manuscript, for example. My generation cannot read the old manuscript, but she can. This nurturing relationship with me and my teacher and community, that we have same vision, that I want keep going to reflect on my artwork using same material with the scroll, with the, let's say, traditional canvas, with the antique material, and bring the art into the essence to be sublime that we didn't believe anymore after Plato say about mimesis, we can mimicking the nature. Actually, we see the nature is still sublime. So we challenging the logocentrism that we accepting from the institution and let us free from every, like something already injecting from the school, for example, and start to accepting something considered not logic, but it's actually, there's a reference if you want to find it and dig it deeply something. It's always, it's always surprising to work with, let's say, I call it divine algorithm, something like that, yeah. Yeah, so the knowledge exists, we just need to find any reference, the archetype, etc. So yeah, I mostly work with that kind of sense.
Well, we're going to have to go through quite a few more before we start from Shao Fan, his images again. So maybe I'll push you a little bit more. You used the word archetype. So, these archetypes of women that you're seeing in these traditional paintings, right? They're usually witches, they're demons. Like, these archetypes are in these, they're quite violent. Like, it's not really the way we want to see women in the world now. So maybe we're going to get back to your images in 2 slides. If you could talk a little bit about the way you're trying to change this archetype of women within your work, I think that would also be interesting for the audience.
Yes, I just want to walk and imagine as the God is woman, like the God were a woman, because we always inherit the concept of God in very masculine way, but somehow our natures, when nature speak, is very nurturing. We can see the divine on the abundance of the nature, the, like how they can bring us prosperity in life, for example, and it's very feminine rather than in, like masculine and destruction, etc. I just want to absorb that kind of essence in my artwork and make a balanced perspective of what we inherit in general art, like in masculine gaze, for example, and bring, let's say, balanced perspective of what is woman gaze in the art, something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, and I guess when we speak of living tradition, there's no life without women. So I think that's another way of looking at it. So Shao Fan, we're about to get to your images, so looking forward to hearing your perspective.
I particularly agree with Citra just now in saying that the female is perfection, especially in Chinese characters, where there is the Chinese nu, the female sign or character, where there is this particular part or radical in the Chinese character. It connotes something good, something that is positive. A lot of goodness is related to the female. So I particularly agree with Citra on that point. And here on the screen, this is a craftsmanship that I have put from the Ming Dynasty furniture into this design. And the design we saw just now was a piece of beard, a piece of hair. And here, just now, rather, there was this circular chair. And I basically dismantled it, took it apart, and I put space in between the different parts. And this one is a shui mo, ink and water painting. This ink painting, as I've mentioned just now, the way I'm adopting is to show limitless time. So on this particular paper canvas, I have made multiple, endless brush strokes. So this is different in terms of its substance and feel with the traditional ink painting. And this is from 5,000, 6,000 years ago. It's a jade cong this ornament or object. It's unimaginable how at the time they did not have technology, they did not have very hard tools. They were able to carve these jade objects. And this is another ink that I have produced. That was a rabbit, and this is an apple. And this is very different from oil painting that I used to do using ink. Basically, this is unreplicable because it is one stroke of ink on top of another, on top of another. And this resonates with a Song Dynasty painting. This one, that is it resonates. So I have used this ancient painting as a model. So it has a steel kind of feel. A steel is like a tablet, a stone tablet, which resonates with the mountainscape in the painting. And this is a garden. This is a Chinese garden, a Song Dynasty design in London. And if you look at the subterranean level, this is the design of a design for a London site, and it is a Song Dynasty one. And this is a stool. That was the Song Dynasty one, and I have designed this particular stool. So this is a modern piece of furniture. Now this one we see on the screen is a very typical Ming chair. And my creation takes elements from that Ming chair. And next we have a piece of eyelash. That's right, this is the eyelash. This also resonates with the Ming chair, the circular chair. So that was a creation. This is Citra's work, I'm sure.
37 seconds, and I want to give time for one question, which we'll have to answer probably in a sentence each. Does anyone have a question that they'd love to ask these incredible speakers and artists?
I want to ask Citra, do you think there's any change? It's like since you start your work it's like about the woman, topic of women rights, like that. Is there any change since you start your work as the topic of women's rights, like that? Is there any change in nowadays world?
In nowadays world, in today, like, do you see, like, have you seen like a social change as a result of your practice?
Oh, yeah. Yes, I mean, it's very interesting question about to see the changing. I mean, making art is not problem to see. It's a quick change, quick results of what. I mean, it's like lifetime commitment, I think. I mean, I see the change a bit in Kamasan painting community, where usually the painter made male painting on their traditional painting, and because I researched there, I studied there for maybe almost 6 years, being in discussion, and they saw my painting. We exchange the knowledge there. They start to change. I mean, interested to put more beauty, put more woman in the painting, bring the new story, because there's a lot of flexibility in the traditional art where the painter as the master of the narrative, like the director. So it's also very freely to interpret the old manuscript. It's no need to exactly the same what I mean, we believe the subjectivity to transfer the knowledge on the canvas, something. So for me, the change as simple as I bring the distribution of the opportunity for the traditional painter there, because all this time they are neglected, that they didn't have any good opportunity, bringing my artwork, mirroring their technique, their knowledge, also promoting them as the origin or the source of my technique, of my painting that I learned from them, for example. And it also creates a new possibility of economy distribution, something, because I'm working with the crafter there. We do collaboration. It's somehow there's an also economic value happening there, and it make them more have confidence to try something new rather than making a copy, the same things, repetition. Somehow it's encourage them to make new things, develop new things. Yes.
Great. So with that, time's over. Thank you so much. And thank you so much to Stephanie for, curating such a wonderful conversation. Thank you.